Attention on deck.
Your instructor is a Top Gun graduate with real-world experience in every mission aspect you will be expected to master. His exploits are legendary, and he's considered to be one of the finest pilots this program has ever produced. What he has to teach you may very well mean the difference between life and death. I give you Captain Pete Mitchell. Call sign, Maverick.
Good morning.
What's poppin', YouTube? How's it going? Football is back. We are back. Everybody's back. Friends, fans, football. Maverick. Let's get this. Okay, so yeah, that happened. Match day 4, and obviously the biggest surprise. I think the biggest surprise of the weekend was obviously Liverpool losing to Nottingham Forest, especially at home. An away loss, you could always look for, factors, 12th man, there are all kinds of things that you could look at if it was an away loss, but it was at Anfield. And that's crazy, right? I mean, we rarely ever expect Liverpool to drop points at Anfield, especially if they're not facing anybody inside the Big Six, right? But yeah, like I said, that happened. So yeah, we're going to look into all of that. The Liverpool Spurs game. I'm sorry about that. The Arsenal, the North London derby, let me just call it that. That was interesting. The North London derby was very interesting, without a doubt. I thought that was I saw an article that referred to it as fiery, and I thought that was a good word. Fiery was a good word for that, for a game that had only one goal in it at the end of the day. There was, it was, for the 90 minutes, that game was on the boil, right? Like, a lot of the pundits, at the end of the day, probably because Arsenal got the results, a lot of them talked about how, it didn't seem, it was a very professional performance from Arsenal. And I'm not even disputing that. There was a maturity. If you look at the video that I put up ahead of the game, I talked about mentality. I thought mentality was a thing to look out for in the North London derby. As it turns out, Arsenal had a lot of it for that game. It will be interesting to see how much of that mentality is available when they travel to Atalanta, when they travel to the Etihad. I think these are two good games. You don't want to say the North London derby doesn't have value in the sense of the game against Atalanta and the game against Manchester City of a bigger profile. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that the North London derby certainly did serve up a intro to two very difficult fixtures. They have to be. One is against one of the best teams we've ever seen in the Premier League, if not the best. And the other is a team that has certainly exploded onto the stage in Atalanta. I mean, they were the first team. People are talking about Bayer Leverkusen having lost their invincible run in the league. But the truth is that invincible run was a run that stretched across every single competition they played. It was in the Cup, it was in the League, it was in the Europa League as well. And it was Atalanta who broke that in the final, no less. So that makes Atalanta a very dangerous side. And they did well. I mean, they're in the Champions League now, so they did. It wasn't just about, I'm trying to say that Atalanta wasn't just performing in the Europa League. They were performing in the league as well. So that game is a very good game. They're in the Champions League. They are home. It's Arsenal, and the positive trajectory that Arsenal has been on is not just noticeable within the Premier League, it's also been noticed in Europe. So Atlanta will certainly, they will certainly be up for it. They are home. It will give them anybody that is playing Arsenal right now, would naturally be expected to say that this game will give them a good idea of where they are at, because whether we like it or not, Arsenal right now is being considered a very, very top side. All you have to do is look at the headlines that have come out of England over the past 72 hours since the North London, well, over the last 48 hours since the North London derby. So they're not to be sneezed at right now in anybody's eyes. So that means that Atalanta, I don't know why I keep saying Atlanta. Atalanta is going to be up for it entirely. And of course, you get past that obstacle, you've got City next at the Etihad. So I gotta say that with just 4 games in, I would say 5, but fine, 4 games in. With just 4 games in, I think Arsenal are faced with a litmus test, a very hot fire that will give us an idea. Not that we'll see them through the league, no, because we know that last season, even though they didn't lose to City last season, yeah, they certainly played for that draw. I can understand the explanation that has continued, because that's the consistency of the explanation to come out of Arsenal, being that it was never their plan to play defensive. That was just them adapting to what they saw at the Etihad. I've heard a lot of people say that, especially from within Arsenal themselves. So I'm going to give them that benefit of the doubt, that for that last season, maybe it really was that. Maybe due to the mentality issues that we know they suffered from last season, maybe they got there and they said, you know what, guys, let's not go at these guys. Let's just make sure we don't get beat here. So I can understand that. So if we give them that pass, then there is certainly a conversation to be had for, okay, so what are you guys going to do when you go there this season? Are you going to go there and say, we want this, all of it? Or are you going to go there and say, oh, we've met, I'm not here to second guess them. I'm not going to go down that road, because what I said before the weekend, I said, if Arsenal could not get past Spurs, could not get past Atalanta, and could not get past City, then there's no need for anybody coming to talk about, them being in the title race. So fair play to Arsenal. They came up against Spurs. They put up a very professional performance, very gritty, very, very focused, very determined, and yeah, set pieces. We've heard people talk about the set piece thing for Arsenal. But, I will say this. Looking at that whole set piece thing, I do feel that the way everybody's talking about it, especially with regards to Arsenal, I think if this conversation continues, the truth is that everybody's just going to play a part in giving Arsenal Football Club a psychological edge when it comes to set pieces, because the way everybody's talking about it, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before, Arsenal get a corner in a game, and that tension, in as much as it's going to be good for the Arsenal fans who will come to begin to believe that every set piece is a sure goal, the problem I see for the rest of the league is that it begins to put that uncertainty as an opposite to the certainty in the mind of Arsenal players and Arsenal fans, right? The longer this goes on, the more you're going to have a situation where teams facing Arsenal will be very afraid of giving corners away. They're going to be afraid of set pieces when they are facing Arsenal. And that's a psychological edge that, personally, I would have said you don't want to give any team. But, it's being talked about last season was last season. We're 4 games in, right? I would have thought a conversation about Arsenal set pieces would have been one that involved, let's say, first game of the season, they score from a set piece, or second game of the season, they score from a set piece. It's the 4th game of the season, but well, check it out. That stat is being counted as something to do with the calendar year, which is obviously still a large part of last season. So you've got words like Arsenal scored 22 goals from set pieces. You get all of that being tossed out, and people begin to take that on mentally, psychologically. So yeah, if it gives Arsenal an edge, I'm not going to begrudge them that. They're the ones who went out and hired a set piece coach. That guy's earning a salary. Like, he's he's in a position earning a salary that how many of the 19 other teams in the Premier League have somebody in that position as well? I'm not sure how many there are, like dedicated to that role. So all well and good for Arsenal. They have gotten past Spurs, but that just leaves us open to the possibility that, okay, maybe we are seeing the forging finally of a team ready to go all the way, to look the dragon in the eye and to emerge victorious. We'll see how that goes, but